On February 2nd of this year, an unnamed male student who graduated from Yale amended a lawsuit against the university. The case was mentioned in a few articles, but seems to have lacked getting the attention that it warrants. As with so many other issues that I discuss or highlight, this example illustrates the difficulty within a system of actually getting the result that the system was set up to achieve. This particular case involves sexual assault allegations, and it details some of the major flaws within a system of authority, investigation, and punishment. I want to be clear, though, that schools, colleges, universities are in difficult positions. Sexual assault, sexual harassment should never be tolerated, and allegations must be investigated and dealt with as necessary. The current system at Yale and many private universities, however, appears to promote bias against males and appears to be so flawed in its implementation that it fails to allow for the consideration of actual facts. I also want to mention that, of course, at this time, the filing is simply outlining allegations. There are a few aspects of the filing, though, that would be supportive of some of the overall facts, however. These include the fact that the male student making the allegations has never been criminally charged or prosecuted for sexual assault. Filing this claim against Yale more readily opens himself up to formal charges being filed, as it's very likely that the female students who made the original arguments or complaints will be called on for evidence. Risking criminal charges would be a big deterrent against filing the complaint if the facts in any way supported his guilt. Also, the complaint quotes directly from electronic messages and facts or testimony from the school hearings when the complaints were investigated. If any of this information is incorrect, all credibility for the filing will be lost, so it's very likely that these claims are accurate as well. In no way does this mean that the entire filing is accurate, but it does support the truthfulness of some of the overall aspects of the claim and its details. In April of 2011, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights sent out what is known as a Dear Colleague letter. This letter threatened to withhold federal funding to public and private universities if they did not put into place investigation and reporting systems concerning complaints of sexual assault, sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, as well as other offenses. Prior to this policy letter going out, allegations of this nature would have been filed with police agencies. In December of 2013, John Doe was called into a meeting with the Title IX coordinator at Yale regarding a paper he had submitted. He was a philosophy major and had submitted a paper to his teaching assistant. The assignment was to provide a critique of a section of Plato's Republic regarding justice and how it integrates with matters of the soul. Plato argues that the soul has three parts: the rational, the spirited, or desire for power, and the appetitive, or lust. If directed at the same object, the three may be in conflict. In the paper, John argues at one point that the desire for power can be allied with lust against reason. He states that in the case of a rapist, reason should dictate not to rape, but that a desire for power combined with lust must be stronger. Rape is not a rational act. Later in the paper, he continues to denounce both rape and the rapist, quoting from the paper. Perhaps then, similarly, Plato might believe that in the case of the rapist would be considered in a similar vein to the non-noble person. The rapist lacks the reasoning to tell him that his spirit is misaligned. Thus, in the rapist too, spirit and reason are not in conflict. This counter-argument, though, is weak. It is improbable that it would be the case that rapists are universally not in touch with a reason, telling them that their conduct is counter to reason. John was informed that his choice to use rape as an example made him a person of interest to Yale, and that necessitated intervention to ensure that John was not a perpetrator himself. It is mentioned here that Plato used a murderer as his own example. John was ordered to undergo sensitivity training and was issued a no-contact order with his teaching assistant. At Yale University, there are undergraduate regulations that support academic freedom of expression. On page 47, it states in part that students have the right to think the unthinkable, discuss the unmentionable, and challenge the unchallengeable. Every official at the university has a special obligation to foster free expression and to ensure that it is not obstructed. Further to this, after the Halloween incident in November of 2015, the president of Yale issued a joint statement with its dean. They affirmed the bedrock principle of the freedom to speak and be heard, not as a special exception for unpopular or controversial ideas, but for them especially. I guess those principles don't apply when students are trying to decide what to wear on Halloween, or when they use crimes to illustrate examples of an assignment on justice. It should be obvious, but John went through the complaint procedure, was issued a no-contact order, and ordered to take sensitivity training after not being found in violation of any rule or Yale's university-wide Committee on Sexual Misconduct Procedures. John began a consensual sexual relationship with another student, Jane, about 2 months earlier in October of 2013. This relationship was initiated by Jane. The filing claims that text messages show that Jane initiated sexual meetings at least 32 times, compared to John initiating meetings only twice. The allegation is made that Jane demanded John's attention throughout their relationship, and she would berate him and blame him for hurt feelings if she didn't get the response that she wanted. The filing notes numerous text message exchanges that support this, and includes quotes from a couple of them. "How goes the work?" John replies, "Intense." "What does that mean?" "Same." "What's the exam time tomorrow?" "Can't talk, gotta work, Bible." "I'm just trying to be nice." Later she follows up, this is about 45 minutes afterwards, "Okay, look, I was just trying to express interest in how things are going for you. And again, I felt like you're being rude or cold to me for no reason. This doesn't even have anything to do with how much time you have or how busy you are. I don't know why you'd choose to address me like that." John replies, "Can we please stop this? I just really can't text. I meant no harm. I need to keep focus. You're being self-destructive. I will not talk about this any further." Her response is, "There is no this. The text you just sent were unnecessarily rude in response to me just trying to be sweet. Anyone would have a negative reaction to that. This is not me being self-destructive, and this is not some continuation of a previous issue. You're making way more of it than is there. I just deserve some basic human politeness than the way you were just acting. People don't talk to me that way, and I'm sure they don't talk to you either. So I don't understand why you would now. Again, treating me with basis, respect, politeness isn't a time issue." She continues, "I know a lot of busy people right now, and no one else thinks that because they're busy, it's okay to stop being nice to people. Do you seriously not get that you can maintain a polite tone without it taking any more of your time? You're the one being destructive here. I was just trying to be nice to you." About an hour later, "Why can't you just say you're sorry? I literally cannot understand why you'd rather act like a jerk to me because you're busy. It doesn't make any sense." The filing continues. Regardless of the tone of her messages and the lack of resolution, they still got together for a sexual encounter, followed by her trying to initiate another one the following night. "Want to come over? Thanks for inviting me, but I don't think I'll make it. Damn, horny, but okay, maybe tomorrow." John was under pressure from final exams and apparently had endured lengthy conversations where Jane would get upset and blame him for her self-doubt. They would meet for lengthy conversations about her issues and feelings. After denying sexual invitations for several days in a row, John agreed to meet Jane to talk if the conversation was short. The conversation, however, wasn't short, and led to another. After the second conversation of several hours, John broke off his relationship with Jane altogether. The relationship resumed in January of 2014. On January 19th, Jane asked John for a sexual encounter. A series of angry texts followed, plus 10 phone calls. The next day, Jane called 11 more times. On January 22nd, John alleges that he met Jane and told her they shouldn't have sex anymore, but that Jane got physical and grabbed him, fell on him, and kept him in her room for over an hour to talk things through. On February 9th, Jane again asked for a sexual encounter, and when John declined, she sent another series of angry texts and 8 phone calls within half an hour. Earlier in their relationship, Jane had signed a note asking for John to be sexually dominant. On March 6th, John had traveled to and from New York City for doctor's appointments. He claimed to be exhausted from the day after spending 10 hours on public transportation and had a midterm exam the next day that he needed to study for. Jane texted and wanted to come over. John said that he needed to study, and if she came over, he couldn't pay any attention to her. He texted that he had to work, he couldn't have sex, and would not be present at all as he would be studying. During a conversation while Jane was there, John told her while they were not seeing each other in January, John had sex with another woman, Sally. This was the only time John and Sally engaged in sex. It was on January 17th. Jane became irate and started insulting John and arguing. At 3:30 in the morning, about 2 hours after she first arrived, Jane was not showing any signs of letting up. John brushed his teeth and said he had to go to bed and they could continue the conversation the next day. As provided by her own testimony at the hearing at Yale, Jane followed John into his bedroom willfully and without force. She continued to complain and argue with him while he had his back turned to her and was holding pillows over his ears. This was also not disputed at the hearing. Now imagine the roles being reversed. A male not letting a female sleep and continuing to argue for hours while a female was curled up in a fetal position with pillows over her ears and asking the male to leave repeatedly. Yale University would easily recognize this as abusive. Jane wouldn't leave. This cycle had played out in the past, and John asks her if she wants to have sex to end the argument. Jane gets into John's bed voluntarily and without any use of force at all. This is acknowledged in the investigation and in the hearing. Jane states, "I could have left and I just didn't. I don't know why. I could have left, but I wanted him to be nice to me, so I got into his bed." 2 days later, on March 8th, John broke up with Jane after she attempted to arrange another sexual meeting. On April 4th, Jane, accompanied by friends who worked at the chaplain's office, went to the Share Center and made allegations that would become the basis for her complaint to Yale's university-wide committee on sexual misconduct procedures. Sally, the woman that John had sex with in January while he was not seeing Jane, worked at the chaplain's office as well. The allegations included, in part, Jane saying, "As the argument escalated, he demanded I have sex with him. I was extremely upset by the argument and told him I did not want to have sex with him. He was verbally abusive and threatening at first, but ended up using physical strength to force me to have sex with him while he insulted me and verbally abused me in other ways. Afterwards, he kept both of his arms around me in an aggressive and forceful way, and I felt too terrified to leave the apartment." In breach of the confidentiality and impartiality policies, the chaplains began discussing the complaint. One recommended John be castrated, and another recommended he be banned from the center completely. He was even advised to stop attending Yale. Although he continued to attend Yale, he stopped going to the center. Through these breaches of confidentiality, Sally learned of the complaint. John and Sally had continued to text and chat thousands of times through the middle of the day on April 5th. However, that evening, John saw Sally walking towards him, and when she noticed him, she abruptly turned and walked away. John texted her, "Are you mad at me or anything of the sort? I saw you on campus and called out to you and you ran the other way. Just want to make sure we're okay." Sally didn't respond and had no further communication with John at all. As a result of the complaint, John had severe confidentiality restrictions placed on him and was assigned an English professor with little experience as an advisor. He was not informed that he could speak to outside legal counsel, nor was he informed that he could prepare an opening statement for the hearing. John tried to report his previous experiences with Jane, along with the incident from January, when Jane physically stopped him from leaving her apartment. He was informed that he could face further discipline for retaliation. His complaint was not accepted nor investigated. John asked the UWC member, "Is it possible that I am the victim?" and was told, "That is not how we choose to see it." In the past, Yale has rejected or dismissed claims of intimate partner violence brought from males at least 4 times. There is no evidence to suggest that any female claim has ever been rejected or dismissed. Jane began her allegation with the claim that John used physical strength to force her to have sex with him, then kept his arms around her aggressively and forcefully, and that she felt too terrified to leave. During the investigation, this changed to an allegation that John took her hand and led her to bed, but he then pulled her on top of him. She then felt terrified as she lay on top of him crying. At the hearing, this changed again to her saying, "He asked me for sex and I could have left and I just didn't. I don't know why. I could have left, but I wanted him to be nice to me, so I got into his bed." The panel did not find John responsible for physically forcing Jane to have sex. They found, however, that it was non-consensual, as Jane entering John's bed voluntarily to have sex was not positive, unambiguous, and voluntary, pursuant to their standard for consent. The panel recommended that John be suspended for 1 year. Yale reduced this to probation. Even this seems troubling. I am not sure what's worse, a finding of guilt given the facts of the case, or a finding of probation for punishment for a person found guilty of sexual assault. A no-contact order was put in place. Even after Jane graduated in May of 2014 and was no longer a student, Yale demanded John produce a regular itinerary. This was then provided to Jane to ensure their paths would not cross. In November of 2014, John was again called to the Title IX office. He was informed that Sally made an informal complaint that John was stalking her, as she was seeing him in places all over campus, including places she didn't expect to see him. She was requesting a no-contact order. As was later revealed in an investigative report, the location Sally saw John was at a Starbucks where he lived, on the only direct route to school from his home, and at a college residence where she knew he had friends. Sally had also made a complaint of sexual misconduct, which included an allegation of restraint and rubbing. Sally would not be able to request a no-contact order without any allegation of sexual misconduct. Yale was seeking a voluntary no-contact order and asked John, among other things, not to go to certain residential areas of the campus. John didn't like this, as he had study groups and friends in those areas, and he asked what the penalties would be for not complying with a no-contact order if it was voluntary. A formal complaint was filed by Yale, and when asked what John thought of the complaint, John stated he thought that it was silly. He was admonished for using a sexist word, which is a pejorative term that subjugates women. Little girls are often told by males that their opinions are silly, which undermines their confidence and marginalizes their experiences. By using the word silly, you are perpetuating a culture that is dismissive towards the opinions of women. And that is a direct quote. To support her claim of stalking and unwanted sexual contact, she alleged John brought her flowers and held her hand at a play that they attended together. I'm not sure when the word silly would be used better. In any event, Sally only filed an informal complaint. The formal complaint was filed by a member at Yale. At the hearing, he explained that he filed this formal complaint as a result of a previous history involving restraint. This was after the conclusion of Jane's allegation, where there was no finding of physical force used at all. Sally did not attend the hearing and provided no further evidence. John was found not responsible of any claim in the complaint. It was determined that the frequency and intensity of John's presence did not rise to the level of stalking as contemplated by the sexual misconduct policy. John tried to file a complaint as Sally's claims were untruthful. Even though Yale requires complainants to be truthful subject to penalties, his counterclaim was ignored, not investigated, and dismissed. Even though John was found not responsible in any way, he was still placed under a no-contact order and not allowed in certain areas of the campus without an escort. Sally was seeking a no-contact order, did not appear at the hearing. John was found not responsible but was still formally restricted. Sally only filed an informal complaint, but a formal complaint was filed because a school administrator found a pattern of physical restraint in his history, even though it was an undisputed fact that no previous physical force of any kind had been used. As a result of the no-contact order, John was not allowed to attend graduation ceremonies for friends. He could not travel freely without escorts, and even after his own graduation, was asked to leave a restaurant where the complainant worked, even though he had no knowledge that she was working there at all. John did not attend his own graduation ceremony for fear of repercussions. He was also blocked from accessing Yale's senior recruiting process until after it ended. Sally, meanwhile, was presented with an award for compassion. The issues lay in the process and within the system. Individually, all cases of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, and harassment need to be explored and investigated. This case does not suggest that sexual assault and sexual harassment does not exist. It does appear to illustrate, however, some of the issues that exist across much of the United States when quasi-legal processes get the incentives wrong, and a system is built with federal funding, job retention, and justification in mind. By reading the full lawsuit document, you can better understand how difficult it is for someone accused of sexual assault to obtain basic rights such as innocent until proven guilty or the right to question your accuser. When the government threatens to withhold funding in excess of $500 million, how can we expect the reaction to simply be fair and honest? Of course there will be incentives to appease by any means necessary. The idea that college campuses in particular support a rape culture is just not truthful. In a special report by the Department of Justice in 2013, it found that rapes and sexual assaults occur with less frequency on campuses than outside of them. If colleges across the country were supporting a rape culture, this would simply not be the case at all. On the other hand, it would be difficult to find a case like John's happening anywhere else besides a private college campus. The denial of rights and due process is difficult to comprehend. In his case, it all started with a teacher's assistant being upset with his use of rape as an example of a crime, even though he was denouncing it and claiming that it was not a rational act. Jeb Rubenfeld wrote a paper on the issues surrounding Title IX, private universities, sexual assault allegations, and constitutional rights. He concludes that we have reached a point where arguing for fair process can trigger charges of sexism and rape apology. He considers what future historians will ask when looking back. They will ask what combination of activism and appeasement, of real victimization and false victim-mongering could have led to this new hysteria. They will wonder how so many in positions of respect and authority, who knew or should have known what was happening, willingly participated or did not speak. A list of source material is available in the description. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a comment and hit that like button. If you didn't like it, please explain why. Open discussion is the only way to have a better understanding of differing views. Sharing this video on social media can help keep conversations alive. Now, here are a few other videos that you may be interested in.